Hey there, I'm Zach Abramowitz, and I am legally disrupted. What if AI doesn't just replace your old software? What if AI changes our very conception of what it means to be a software or a tech company? And what if in this new version, it's not the tech, but actually the people that make the company valuable? On today's episode 41 of Zach Abramowitz is Legally Disrupted, I'm talking with Jamie Tso and Raymond Sun. They are the founders of the legal Quants community, and they are the embodiment of the 2026 AI Zeitgeist. Now, recently, Harvey, who I was writing about throughout all of 2025, announced an $11 billion valuation on a new raise. And for someone who has followed legal tech for as long as I have, and Harvey in particular, this should have been like really key important news. But I have to tell you something. I kind of yawned because right now, Jamie, Ray, and the legal Quants community have my undivided attention. Now, you have to hear about these guys' backgrounds. Long before they were pioneering legal AI, they were both content creators who had some pretty significant viral experiences. So Jamie ran a fitness transformation channel on YouTube that racked up 2 million views. And during COVID, Ray built a machine learning app that compares your dance moves to professional K-pop dancers. And that went completely viral across South Korea, Japan, and China. By the way, both of them are corporate lawyers at big-time law firms. But that content creator instinct perfectly set the stage for how they built this current movement. When Jamie started sharing posts on LinkedIn about vibe coding, different apps that he was building and different products that he was replicating, he just wanted to find other lawyers who thought like him. But very, very soon, other lawyers started tagging him on LinkedIn, showing that they were inspired by what he was building and showing what they had built. So what started as this tiny 5-person WhatsApp group has organically exploded into a highly active grassroots community of 100 lawyer developers, vibe lawyers, if you will, who are sharing insights every single day. Now, at Killer Whale Strategies, we are keeping a very close eye on these two because they represent the real shift happening in our industry. The next big thing may not just be buying big vendor solutions, even ones that are AI first. What might be coming next is the vibe coding playbook. Jamie and Ray are showing us a future where lawyers take control and not just identify the pain point, but actually build their own bespoke, just-in-time apps to solve immediate problems. They have an incredibly rare skill set that combines tech, law, and content. And we think that they are writing the blueprint for the lawyer-developer era. I could not be more excited to share this conversation with you. By the way, I should tell you in advance, we went for nearly an hour and a half. I am very excited about Legal Quants, about what Ray and Jamie are building. So let's learn how to build. Let's hear the vision. Let's hear about the community. Let's get disrupted. So I was just saying to you guys offline how excited I am for this podcast. I've been doing this exercise recently with our team internally and then sharing a lot of this with our clients where I talk about the 2025 to 2026 vibe shift, or as the way I've put it, like the Zeitgeist. You know, what is the AI Zeitgeist right now? And I feel like you two are like the 2026 AI Zeitgeist right now within legal, whereas in the last couple of years, Harvey and then Harvey Lagora, and they've kind of like owned the mind share, right? And by the way, there are other big legal AI companies and other spaces, but if you travel in these circles, if you're kind of like following LinkedIn, if you're, looking at Reddit threads, a lot of the energy was on these like hyperscaling startups. And, just the other day, Harvey announced they've raised now at an $11 billion valuation. And for someone like me who's been following legal AI and legal tech for many years, that should have been amazing. Like a legal profession, legal industry, like decacorn. This is huge. And yet I kind of yawned because the two of you and Legal Quants right now is really the company that I'm following. And I have been writing extensively about Harvey. I wrote about it so much in 2025 because it was such a big deal. But I think there's so much about what you guys are doing that is capturing where AI is moving right now. And one of the big challenges, and I want to start this off with the two of you, one of the big challenges in AI, and I think this is getting to be more amplified recently, is that AI is so fast moving that, that sort of keeping up with all the news, all the movements, all the advances is draining, and it sometimes can cause a bit of anxiety. Whereas I think in people, in 2025, there was a sense of, I finally have got the hang of this. 2026 is like, I'm feeling lost and behind. Jamie, why don't you start us off with a reaction? I want to get Ray's reaction to that note.
Totally agree. I feel that I've never felt so behind in AI, and it feels like for the past few months, we've seen Claude Opus 4.6. Actually, Gemini 3 first is basically everyone's calling it AGI, and then Claude Opus 4.6 and Claude Code. Where everyone just says, which is like the wrong name to call the product, because it's basically an operating system, and a lot of non-technical people are using it. And now you with Claudebot, it's just impossible to keep up. To be frank, I there's a lot of reading that I need to do, and but I feel like I cannot keep up with the latest technology. It's so fast.
Yeah, ditto. And I know a few years ago when people talked about the growth of AI will be exponential, I knew what that meant rationally, but I never really felt, what did I feel like emotionally? Maybe 2023, 24, things were still manageable, but since 25, I think since DeepSeek, and then that really kickstarted a huge drive in innovation across both sides of the world. Like every 2 weeks there's something that's come out, and each week replaces like the development of the previous week, and so we keep seeing that all the time. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge to try to keep up with everything, but it's very exciting as well. It's very stimulating.
Yeah, and I've got this this slide up on the screen. I think it's interesting to note, like Andre Karpathy himself, like a guy who coined the term vibe coding, is admitting recently to feeling very much behind. And to your point, Ray, that there is this sense not only that like things are moving fast, but like we thought we could sort of like grasp exponential progress and what that meant. Like for me, my feeling was, just to use that point, in late 2023, I began investing in NVIDIA stock. And the reason I started doing it then is because I felt like, wait a second, everyone else is saying it's too late to invest in NVIDIA stock. But if this is truly exponential progress, there's no way that anyone could possibly have baked in what that means. Meaning the market can't understand exponential progress because it's something beyond human psychology and the human mind. And on that, like what I've told people and lawyers from the get-go is not to be so concerned with like which AI tool that you're using, but just to be using AI and learning about AI. And I know that's like simple, so you can't like charge a whole lot of money for giving that advice. But I feel that one of the things that's happened, and where you're starting to have this feeling of like feeling left behind at various levels, is the value of early adoption is compounding, not just in your capabilities and knowing like what prompts to push, but just what your brain is ready to wrap itself around and be like, oh, okay, like that's what's possible. And I think that if you don't sort of do that process early, your brain will take a long time to adjust. And I think this is like this, there's this gap right now. If you go on like, social or Reddit, you'll see a lot of people who are saying like, hey, for everyone in the AI conversation, just understand that like 99% of the population like have not heard of Cursor and Claude Code, but there is like this real feeling of like the AI haves and have-nots. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I think that the frontier technology is, what we see or what we perceive as a frontier technology is probably not what the insiders perceive. Because if we even think about what OpenAI, Anthropic internally, what they see will probably be light years ahead of what we are actually seeing in the market. And I think that is what scares me. And for lawyers, I feel that our our generation of lawyers, I think I would encourage lawyers to try out the frontier, whatever frontier technology that they can get their hands on. I think that would inform them of what the frontier looks like and how they can apply that on their day-to-day job. I feel there is the aspects of building tools for lawyers, but there is also another aspect where lawyers not only build tools for themselves, but also experiment with the possibilities of AI and knowing what's possible. And that has been my kind of mission for the past few months. That's why I kind of showed, how good Gemini 3 is, how good Claude Opus is, and with whatever open source technology that we can stitch together, what we can already achieve. I think that in itself is the kind of AI literacy that I encourage my fellow lawyers to cultivate.
Yeah, and before you jump in on this, I wanted to highlight, a very interesting podcast with the founder of Base 44, Maor Shlomo. And I've been saying for the last year that was the most important legal AI deal to watch. Of course, it's not a legal tech company, right? You don't think of Base 44 as legal technology, and I don't think they're even going to get into that space. But I thought it was more important last year that people understand vibe coding, the concept of being lean, not needing a huge team to accomplish what you would have once needed a huge team in order to accomplish. I mean, there's so many takeaways from that deal. But he has a podcast. He went on Harry Stebbings' podcast, and he was talking about the importance of showing users the magic. Actually, this may have been a podcast he did with Lenny Rashitsky even earlier, but one of the things he talked about in that podcast was, he said, when it came to AI, he realized that more important than building the most rigorous product was a product that had very, very little friction between users seeing what AI could accomplish for them that they simply would never have thought possible. And I think that there's like a kind of like anxiety pre-AI, because you're thinking like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to waste my time with one of these tools and it doesn't even work? Or you think to yourself, wait, I'm going to see something that's going to be terribly frightening. And then I'm going to realize I have to start making some life changes because, oh my gosh, look what's possible. Or third, you think, I'm going to try this. I'm going to realize that it's amazing, but I'm also going to say, I'm too old to learn this. Meaning, so you see the frightening thing, but you're not able to. So I feel like that moment pre-AI is filled with anxiety. And I think what you've been doing on LinkedIn and now with Legal Quants is showing lawyers like, this is not like too difficult for you. Like, this is not above you. You are capable of this. And not just the two of you, like, creating these applications, but now inspiring other lawyers to say, hey, I saw what Jamie did, and now I'm gonna, here's what I've created. And I think that showing the magic has been something that you guys have been really like amazing and impressive with. Ray, jump in, then I'll let Jamie react to all of this as well.
Yeah, definitely resonate with all of the above. And, fundamentally, it's a skill set shift, but deeper down is a mindset shift. And what AI brings and consequential technologies bring afterwards is really forcing all of us to really rethink about the processing of work, the delivery of work, and the interfacing of work, right? And also rethinking about what does legal actually mean now? What is legal service in the next few years, right? Fundamentally, lawyers have been the bridge between the law and broader society. We be the translators, right? And it's a fundamentally information-heavy profession. It's all based on words, and ultimately, it's data, right? At the end of the day, we're also in the data space because we're dealing with legal language, converting raw legal language into language that is understandable and useful to the client. And for the past 100 years, this has mostly been a manual effort of translation, right? Now with these tools, we can really take our game to a step up. How do we not only use AI to help make our existing processes efficient, but also getting ourselves out of the box and really redefining how legal is delivered to the broader society and make it even more useful to clients, right? And so having legal requirements, for example, be more directly operationalizable and more embedded within whatever product or service that the client's trying to get your advice on. So really thinking about delivery format. And I feel like that will be the next phase of thinking once people get used to the whole, this is a new way of doing my work. It'll be taking that step up, right?
But I think this is where I feel like AI is much more challenging than previous like SaaS technologies, like a matter management system or a practice management system. Those didn't challenge fundamental beliefs about the world, about yourself, about the profession. And I've said this from early on. Part of the reason lawyers don't like the conversations about AI, and what I think a lot of people don't like, is that it makes them reevaluate like what it means to be human, right? So in other words, is what separates me from a computer the ability to like reason? Maybe not. Now, maybe you say, well, the computer doesn't have emotion and I do. This is true, but again, it's an uncomfortable conversation that Salesforce never forced anyone to have, right? That Workday never forced anyone to kind of grapple with these deep philosophical questions. And I think that, what does it mean to be a lawyer is something that we need to like now wrap our heads around. And that's sort of an uncomfortable staring across the abyss. Jamie.
Yeah, I totally feel you. I think AI is fundamentally a complicated technology. I think of it almost like a very dangerous and fast car. Because what is AI in today's term? If we strip away all the UI UX, it's basically the model weights, right? And what do you do with that model? It is complicated. And I feel in the past few years, there are all these legal AI tools that are built just to create that kind of abstraction for lawyers so that the lawyers, they can basically use these tools more easily and to harness the power of AI indirectly. But then there's a group of lawyers that are willing to go one level deeper, right? To see AI in itself as the model and think, what can I do with it? And this brings us to the concept of control, right? If I can configure, control, and design my own AI system, how does it look like? And it goes back to, Ray mentioned the DeepSeek moment, right? That's the moment when AI and LLM became a utility. And if AI becomes something that's free, it's complicated to use, then we can think of the people using it as basically the F1 drivers. You're driving a fast car. How fast can you drive without crashing? I think that's the question. I think a lot of the AI tools out there.
Great analogy.
It's like Toyota, Honda. It's safe, but then you don't actually need to know how it works.
But what's the problem?
Exactly.
Is that when you're providing and I've talked about this before, a lot of companies want to provide an AI with like guardrails and all kinds of stuff around it to the point where it basically neuters the AI. And then people are like, well, if you're going to give me like lame AI at work, I'm going to use my own AI. And I think that in 2025, that might have been like, if you're going to give me some like, pared down branded version of, let's just like, the Walmart, Marty, your Walmart AI chatbot. And kind of just using like, and Walmart's awesome. They're over $1 trillion now. So they're a great company. But my point is, if you're getting like the company version and it can't do what your Chat GPT at home can do, then like forget about it. But I think there's going to be an interesting conversation that I think is already materializing inside of a lot of the AmLaw 200 and the Global 500 firms, which is, wait, do I need to use this like legal AI specific tool that you guys purchased for us? Because I've been able to code something internally that really works much more how I work, and I can get better value out of this than I can of the firm approved tool. And I think that's kind of the new 2026 conversation. Curious, when you talk about like configurability, to me, like I've been hesitant to tell firms to like rethink the build by calculus, because I think in the past, a lot of firms would build things that they absolutely should have bought. And I would like facepalm a little bit over it and think like, oh gosh, this is another kind of like cringy law firm developed tech. I can't think that way anymore at all, because I don't feel like we're talking about products that are being developed by a firm's like IT group that was like, knew some basic SQL. Like, I think we're talking about like the actual users who can build this for themselves, tailored. And if their workflow changes, they can literally throw it out and start from scratch and rebuild it, and not always be in the business of configuring someone else's, one-to-many product that may not work with their user habits.
Yeah, precisely. And which is why I think when we had the vibe coding movement, when we first had a vibe coding movement among within the legal community, I think a lot of people are saying, well, the tools themselves are not production ready, the apps are not secure. And I think that is missing the point. Of course, these are important problems, but I think that will be solved down the road by the cloud providers. I think the more important point here is that we're looking at the skills of these lawyers rather than the apps that they built. Can you imagine how skillful a lawyer need to be building their own tools, to be solving their own problems through technology that way? And it's an extreme form of AI literacy. And I think that should be the focus. And if we the opposite, the opposite would be for a lawyer to just use something off the shelf. It's fully designed to let it work for every all the lawyers. The learning curve is also pretty flat. But the downside for that is it's a black box. You can't really know if things happen, if the AI product yields some bad results. There's no way for you to go back to fix it. You don't even know what went wrong, and you can't. If you don't know what went wrong, it's really hard to improve it, and then you'll better results out of it. But then, with vibe coding and with people finally understanding that using AI in a raw and fundamental way, it's a skill in itself. Then you kind of have that quick iterative loop where you can test, iterate, and design your own workflows, apps, and skills. I think that is the it's the point. It's the whole point.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk about this before, and I'd like to hear like Ray address this first, then come back to you, Jamie. But I've heard you address before, a lot of the questions that will come up is like, well, you can vibe code that, but is it really scalable? And is it really secure? And is it, what I've heard you say, and I think this is spot on, which is, well, you don't need to be scalable necessarily in the way you would if you're building a one to many companies or to many customer style product. Like, the reason they have scalability issues is because they're trying to solve for many customers, right? You can what you just discussed right now is that you can really, like, the configurability value curve is off the charts for vibe coding. Security, as you described, seems to be better again if you're not working, like, the less third parties that you're working with and the more directly you're working with the models. I mean, the transform model itself is a black box, so like no one kind of really knows, but as few black boxes as possible, right? And I think that, so like, there's what I guess I'm trying to say is, it doesn't feel like it's just a question of cost. Like, well, does it cost more to vibe code this, or does it cost more to buy, insert code counsel or whatever, any of these? The real question is like, which is actually more in line with the firm's goals? And again, I've from someone who has discouraged law firms in the past to build a product that they could buy, I find myself vibe shifting, I guess. Ray, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll answer this in 3 quick points. I think first one, we're really seeing a new layer of software, which I like to call bespoke-ware or custom-ware, where it's different from SaaS, where, as you mentioned, one to many, one size fits all. Here we're now at this point in time where you can create a very hyper personalized software, and it can just be for one-time use. Maybe there's a task they only touch one time. You build this app one time, and then you complete it, and that's it. You don't even touch that app again. That's
yeah.
the
Wait, and let
beauty
me
of
give you an
customware.
example. Let me give you a very tangible example. You're starting a new M&A deal. We would typically say, okay, work with Intralinks to get the data room set up, or work with Merrill to get the data room set up. How about spin up a data room? Here's the kind of deal we're working on. Here's the number. Here are the parties that are going to be involved. Here's what each one is going to be looking at. I mean, tailored, individualized, on the fly, per the contours of your deal, per the security requirements of all the parties involved, and you're never going to use it again.
Yeah, that's right. And this emergence of customware leads to my second point, which is around the build and buy equation that you talked about, Zach. I feel like that has now become more of a nuanced question now, which is more like capability versus interface. A lot of the existing tech vendors whose entire business mode is built upon having their interface being fit for purpose for the customer. Well, there's no one better to understand the customer's problem than the customer themselves. And if the customer can solve their own problem through these tools, they solve the interface problem. That really is a challenge for a lot of the interface specific vendors. So a lot of this stuff is now, a lot of the moats that we see is now shifting towards capability. And the ones who are at the forefront of this are thinking, if in 3 to 5 years time, we know that our own customers are building the most bespoke interfaces and we can't compete with them on that front, what about the capability that we can hone in to make sure that even if the customer makes the best custom app, they still need to rely on us for the underlying capability, whether that be the underlying reasoning model or the whatever infrastructure that they're going to provide? That's where that question comes in. So I feel like a lot of the moats will now become an infrastructural battle, less so an app layer battle, which will be a bit more, it's a bit less obvious and less fancy and less sexy and less visible to the everyday consumer, but there's a huge battle going on at the infrastructure layer.
So, I actually, by the way, I just invested in a company called Sandstone, and Sandstone's entire thesis is just exactly that: is to be an infrastructure that connects to different data sources within a legal department, that allows the legal department to get information from the business more easily than they would have up until now. So it's along those lines. But I want to get back to like the moat question in a second. But I want to get Jamie's reaction first. Unless you had another point to add there, Ray, because I know we've been all over the place.
Yeah, I'll just quickly wrap up the
your
infrastructure.
Your third point there, and then we'll go back to Jamie.
So the infrastructure ecosystem, these are the two big pillars, and I'm sure Jamie can speak more to that as we talk more about legal quants. But the third point is really just going back to the whole mindset shift. Lawyers are sort of trained to sort of work with the cards in the hand, right? You're given the facts, assess the risk, assess the liabilities, make the most of your facts, provide an honest advice. It's a type of training where you're trained to play within the box. You can maybe touch the borders, but you're fundamentally trained to be within the box. What I feel like, and what Jamie has started with this vibe coding sort of trend, is that it has inspired lawyers to actually break out of that box, right? You don't have to feel like you're limited by your tools. Actually, you can create new tools to solve your problem. And that one switch, which I feel like it's such a deep emotional impact on so many of us. And that's what I wanted to highlight as a third point.
So the surface area of legal practice, I mean, there's new surface area.
For sure.
That's the best analogy.
So Jamie, I want you to comment on this, but based on what Ray said, I think you're going to steal my point, but I'm looking forward to it.
I think the future is where the clients would interface with the technology, maybe, and to have the lawyers become the API. That's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is, well, the software is a product, but then the lawyers become the interface. So to my mind, lawyering is a people business. There's a lot of soft skill. If you're doing a $5 billion merger, then you better talk to a lawyer, a human, because I think that's how we build trust. Everything could be AI enabled, but then would you do it the other way around, as in, you just use whatever AI tool that was given to you by the lawyer to do the $5 billion merger? I don't think so. So I think that is, I think in the future, it would be, a lot of things would be AI enabled at a fundamental layer, but then still interface, the interface would still be human.
Perhaps more human.
Perhaps more human. Well, to be frank, a lot of people are saying, well, will we have AI to AI, negotiations? I think I was talking to a law firm partner the other day about, whether there will be just AI to AI negotiations, and what if we have these negotiation calls where we can just spin up to 11 labs AI agents that just negotiate with each another. That's not productive, right? That's just more AI slobs. So I do feel that, maybe the human layer would still be there. Yeah.
So I have two thoughts about the human layer, but I want to first tell you what I thought you were going to say, but I think this gets to the legal quants point that Ray was mentioning before. But I have a second human factor that I wanted to discuss. When we were talking yesterday internally and preparing for this podcast, one of the things I was discussing with my team was, like, what is the value of a software company today? Now, there is obviously a layer of software being built that's enabling all the builds, right? So the frontier models themselves, everyone who's taken the frontier model and tried to adapt it for coding and for building, like, this is obviously there's value in that. Although it's like the same time, like, the value unlock has like never been bigger. Like the ability to create that value unlock has never been easier. So where is the value potentially in a company that sells one to many, that scales? And I started thinking about this, and it occurred to me, well, the value would be in the community of users around it. Meaning a software company is actually more human now, because the software company gets, like, how would it be that the customers of the product would increase the value? And I think that when you develop a community around a software product, I think that's going to have extraordinary value moving forward. And now that I've put those goggles on, I went back and I started looking at legal quants, and I'm sitting here going, like, okay, now I think I'm really getting this, because I think they've seen around a corner here. I think they understand that the value is in the community, not in the software, and that the future of valuable software, ironically, is in community. Reactions?
100%. Software cost is going to zero, but talents aren't, right? The whole mission of legal quants is to highlight the talents. The apps that they create is an extension of those talents. The apps they built is a manifestation of the new skills that they acquired the past 2 years. Today, it could be vibe coding, but 3 months from now, it could be, cloud skills. A year from now, it could be designing your own agent. Designing your own agent, that should happen a lot sooner. But then the thinking here is that how do we showcase, these talents? How do we upskill them? How do we discover them? How do we find them, right? If we're talking about, the future of law, I think personally that a lawyer needs to be excellent at tech to be excellent at law. So they need to be able to understand this technology, able to drive fast, using that same technology, and to become a Formula One driver. And I think the community here that we're cultivating is basically one that is where everyone is just so excited. We can talk about that later, about the things that we can do with that. But, how we started is simply that, when I started vibe coding, I started seeing that a lot of people, when they tag in their posts to show their builds, I've been yearning to connect with different lawyers with the same mindset, because I thought I was alone. Then I created this WhatsApp group. It started with just 5 people. Then it slowly grew. Now it's around 100 people. We have hundreds of messages per day, just discussing everything about, applying frontier technology, frontier AI on our day-to-day work. And it's just so fascinating to see that, I'm learning so much from the group as well. And, people are talking about how to use the latest model, the latest technology. When Claude legal plugin drops, someone has already tested it and, given them their feedback. So it was a extremely active and really, the contributions that, the members made really blew my mind.
Ray.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, this spot on with the community angle. And I just want to highlight like how special this community is, because we're talking about a group of people with a combined skill set of law and tech. And when we say law and tech, like out of all the possible best of both worlds skill sets, I feel like this combination is the most lethal and dangerous, because we're talking about technology, which is like the language of production and change, combined with law, which is the language of power. Combine those two together, you have and legal quants captures the global community of this particular skill set. You have people who not just know how to build, they can know how to bring it to scale. They know how to navigate through the regulatory and legal challenges. They can do it all by themselves. And that's huge. The caliber of talent in legal quants, it just blows my mind, to be honest. It's such a special community. Yeah.
So the other way I was thinking about AI being more human and the interface shifting over to the human is I think that law firms might be missing an opportunity. And here, this is free advice. You don't even have to pay McKinsey. The problem with big law firms is they want you to charge them a lot of money for the advice so that they can we brought in McKinsey, but okay, this is just free advice. Go do this. Have all this space in the firm, and they've been having this major challenge. How do we get people back into the office? And I think here's how you get all of your lawyers to want to be back in the office all the time. You build your office to attract clients. You've got all this space. Many law firms have leases that they're locked into. If we knew about remote work, we never would have gotten them. Okay, now ask yourself, what experiences could we create? Whether it's boardroom experiences, whether it is whatever this is, okay? And I'm not saying it's well-defined and you don't have to think about it a little bit, but ask yourself this basic question. What would make our clients want to come into our office and see massive value in doing that regularly? And how could we create the office experience? Because what will happen when clients start coming to the office? All your lawyers will want to be in the office too, because all your lawyers want to be around the clients. And I think that this AI revolution should leave a lot of firms rethinking and saying what did it once upon a time mean to be an attorney before we got all into the documents, all into the digital? What was that actual human to human experience like? And how can we build on that? I'm not saying to go back to the early 1900s, but I think sometimes getting in touch with roots really, really critical for thinking, in advance. And I've heard of firms that do the sort of concierge service when you walk into their building. I think I've heard one of the UK firms is really good about this. I forgot which one, but I think that firms need to start thinking along those lines of okay, assume, like you said, software development goes to zero. I think we probably at some point say document creation probably goes to zero. Okay, so then where would the value be? Where would the value be beforehand? And I think that those who take this question seriously, who like think about it in the shower, who think about it, before they go to sleep, who wake up in the morning thinking about this challenge, those are the ones that are going to solve it. But I think it also you have to admit to yourself, software is going to go to zero, and document creation, a lot of the outputs that we kind of think about today, even if they're not there perfectly, they'll go to zero. That's where this is headed. Was that not an obvious enough question, guys? That's just not like that's not like just like a video like rant clip.
Yeah, I think if I mean, I can, Jamie, happy for you to jump in, but the value, right? Like the very definition of law is that it's meant to be open and accessible. Like the statutes has to be publicly and freely available to read. The value of law has never been about information. The value of a law has always been about abstraction and the insights and the value add to the law. So it goes back to my point, the translation piece. Like anyone can look up the registrar, look up the Corporations Act. The words are in front of you for free, but like, do you get it? Do you understand it? Do you know how to comply with it? That's where the lawyer comes in to apply the skills to translate that for you, to guide you through the process, right? And all the tools that are out there are there to assist the lawyer to do that for you. And it doesn't matter whether you're in a litigation context, in a transaction context, or an advisory context. It's fundamentally the gathering of these raw legal information into a service that actually not just gives the client the answer, but the solution, right? So that's where the value is at. And so I feel like what's great about like the legal profession is that value is naturally changing. It evolves with the times, right? It's just the way we do things are different from period to period. But I feel like fundamentally, it's still kind of that, right? And maybe there'll be methods that, make that translation piece more easy and it requires less human effort, but fundamentally it's still that piece. But of course, it's often like very much subject to debate. I'm keen to hear what Jamie thinks. Yeah.
I mean, to echo your point, Ray, I think only lawyers can reinvent what legal service would look like in the future. That's not a software engineer's job. You can ask AI to, build you, the next generation law firm. It will come up with something that is, that is still a thing of the past. And I think that's where imagination and creativity becomes so important. And AI is fundamentally not creative enough. So I can think of a lot of ways where you can basically give and impress the client, impress upon them, what the future of legal service looks like. And just to give you an example, I'm a funds lawyer, and for a lot of the investors out there, big institutional investors, they hire a bunch of law firms to help them review a lot of fund investments. They've gathered like 1,000 different side letters, but the GC probably are not tracking of all the rights that they've negotiated. Maybe there is some notification rights that they're entitled to. Maybe there are some audit rights that they can actually exercise. But then because it's just impossible to go through those side letters on a day-to-day basis. So what if there's if I'm the lawyer advising this client, I'll basically build them an AI that would just screen your side letters daily to find out, on this day you can exercise these 100 different kinds of rights, and automatically send a notification to the GP asking for them to be respected. And that's just instant alpha, right? You generate intelligence that way. And only lawyers can think of the ways that can advance the client's interest.
So then this is where the prediction that lawyers might soon charge $10,000 an hour is not so crazy, right? In other words, because if what you create in let's say typically in an hour you'd create a document. Again, I'm not saying it takes an hour for a lawyer. No lawyer creates any document in an hour. But in other words, take that same hour and now apply it to a proactive system that you're going to periodically check in on and update and iterate and create new versions. There, like now you start that doesn't sound so crazy that someone might charge $10,000 an hour for that, because the output of what you get is just on a different scale.
I would go further to say that the reason why they can charge that amount is there's no comparable in the market. It's almost like an infinite zero-sum game. Imagine if we have that kind of service and there's only that lawyer who knows how the technology works and promises that this actually works. And if there's no comparable, then of course the supply is low, demand high, and that pushes the price up. But then the reason why I say it's infinite is because once that kind of service appears in the market, people will try to copy, and then people will think of new ways to actually impress the client. It will go on forever. And so I think that, to bring being back to the point about being a lawyer in the future requires a deep understanding of what technology enables. And if we know what technology enables, then we can think, what kind of new alpha we can pursue. And by using analogy alpha, it brings me back to the concept of legal quants. The reason why we say legal quants but not legal engineer is that you can think of a legal engineer as the person who owns the strategy, who kind of thinks where the alpha is, how to pursue it. A legal engineer is given a task, a plan to execute. So it's two different things, I believe. So legal quants needs to be a lot more creative. They're practicing lawyers think of new ways to deliver legal service, and creating apps is just one of them. So yeah, Ray, do you want to?
Anyway, before Ray jumps in, I just want to I want to pick up on one thing and double click on it. You also work with hedge fund clients. And you've the reason I know this is I have a partner who's in hedge funds, and I recognize some of the thinking patterns. Like, how much of your thinking and the way you've been thinking about this product is influenced by, to a certain extent, being like a hedge fund guy?
Only partly, to be honest. I think it actually came from my interest in finance. I did a whole CFA program, and I completed all 3 levels, and that really taught me a lot about how to what is beta, what is alpha, and how do you actually find something that's not correlated to the market. I think that is something that's really interesting, because if we think with legal service, we kind of always try to distinguish ourselves from other people, right? We try to see how we can be better. It's all about competition, and law firms need to one up one another, right? So in that game of differentiation, it comes the desire to build a moat, the desire to actually chase things that will impress the client, and I think that is the whole. That is the whole idea behind thinking how to use AI to create new service, how to spot new markets, new demands. And I think on the hedge fund side, I think that there are some hedge funds that I really look up to. Millennium is one of them, and the way they do it is like basically multi-strategy.
What about High Flyer?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I deep seek is good and so on, but I haven't worked with them. But my point being, the strategies that I would think for a PM, for a portfolio manager, they own a strategy. They need to be responsible for their own P&L. I think that's not so much different from the law firm partner, right? They also need their own book. They also need to serve their own class of clients. They also need to think what their niche is. And I predict that a lot of the really the rainmakers of the future will be ones that will harness this technology really, really well, and then find new ways to serve their clients and try to make a market based on that.
Jump in there, and then I've got a specific question I want to ask you, and then I want to come back to this topic in the last part of this conversation, where I'm going to ask you guys what other lawyers should be doing right now in addition to just coding. So hold that thought. But Ray, jump in on Jamie's rant, and then I've got a specific question for you.
Yeah, I'll just validate Jamie's point around the legal engineer versus the legal quant. I was lucky enough to be one of the early legal engineers. I was actually when I was still studying law school, I worked as a legal engineer job this was 2017, so it's just quite early before language models and all that. And back then, the legal engineer was basically just a person who knows how to code but doesn't have a computer science degree, so they can't be called a software engineer. But because they can code and you're in law, legal engineer. That was the title, right? And it was a way to get around industry awards and all of that. And true to what Jamie said, it was purely implementation, right? I just followed the instructions of the PM. I coded it, and that's it. Legal quants, that's completely different, right? And you have the idea, and then you try to, whether it's AI implementing for you or others helping you implement, regardless of what, it's the idea, right? And I think fundamentally, since Jamie mentioned finance, I'm also just mention like economics, right? Like fundamentally, our economics has been based on the 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, enterprise. I think lawyers have been used, and the whole way we value our services is really in the labor camp, right? X time equals X dollars, right? X effort equals X dollars. I think the fundamental economic philosophy shift that we're facing is, how do we then bring ourselves into the enterprise mindset, where your value is coming from the fact that you combine the other factors of production together to create a service, right? And that's something that from the solo practitioner to the boutique law firm to the big end of town to even the legal tech vendors, really grappling with that question, right? It's a new economic paradigm for the legal profession. And I feel like that's the biggest shift.
So what I've got on the screen right now, and for those who are listening, in audio and not on watching on YouTube, this is an essay from Paul Graham from 14 years ago in 2012, but he applies this to startups. But I think it is absolutely the ethos of what you just described in terms of this next group of what you're calling legal quants. And just to read it, he says, the way to get startup ideas is not to try to think of startup ideas. It's to look for problems, preferably problems you have yourself. The very best startup ideas tend to have 3 things in common. There's something the founders themselves want, that they themselves can build, and that few others realize are worth doing. Microsoft, Apple, Yahoo, Google, and Facebook all began this way. And again, I think that is truly like the ethos that you were describing, with the legal quants. And I think that it's exciting because today, there was always this question, like, lawyers would tell me like, hey, I want to get into legal tech, or I want to get into AI startups and there was always like, okay, well, how are you going to transition? How are you going to make that move, right? How are you going to become a legal engineer like Ray's son, right? But today, you don't have to leave law to do something like exciting and entrepreneurial and new. And to me, anytime that lawyers get to go back and scratch the entrepreneurial itch, and you don't just have to be someone who is, sort of only, less risk appetite by design, overly conservative, overly safe. Not every person who graduates law school has those character traits. And I think this is great for lawyers who want to be able to express themselves entrepreneurially without necessarily giving up on the profession of law.
Exactly. I feel not all businesses need to be built around the tools. And not every tool deserves a business to be built around them. And lawyers, to the extent they can build things, use technology, they just become very, very good generalists. And I think generalists will definitely win in the post-AI age. They just need that safe space to express themselves. They just need to have a the infrastructure that supports them. And right now, I do think that, I've been talking to a lot of vibe coding lawyers, a lot of legal quants. Their common frustration is that, they don't seem to have been able to find that space. And either in a traditional law firm or for those who are more forward thinking, they would apply it for different startups. And then the offers that came back or the roles that they're being given are also not that exciting, right? So, which begs the question. So these talents, they are extremely valuable and would be instrumental to the future of law. What do we do with them? I think this is the biggest mislocation of talent. This is like a talent problem of our industry. And, how to put these people in places where they can shine, have the greatest leverage, and make the greatest impact, I think is a problem that I personally want to solve.
Ray, I wanted to ask you before, and I want to come back to this. I've felt for a long time that AI coming right after the COVID shutdowns towards the end of 2022 is not just a coincidence, but that very much AI took off more because it came post-COVID. Now, the way I've put that is many people were working alone. So the idea that you could now have someone to brainstorm with when you didn't have, John or Mary or Jamie down the hall was hugely valuable. And I think it solved the loneliness problem. I think AI takes off no matter what, whenever it hits. But I think the kindle for that initial fire was the fact that we had sort of just kind of come out of the COVID phenomenon, and this is what came from it. And what I was listening to you on a different podcast, it occurred to me there's another way in which this is true, because there were a whole bunch of people who acquired skills during the course of COVID that they were then able to put into effect right away when AI hit. And in some cases, a lot of those were either technical or digital. So can you talk a little bit about what you did during the lockdowns and during the kind of 20 to 22, which has ended up being quite valuable in an age of AI?
Yeah, so thanks for setting me up for that. My branding was first more known as the guy who built AI to analyze K-pop dancers. And how it started was, as you said, COVID time, lockdown. I do dances. I dance a lot, but so lockdown, no more classes. What do I do at home? And I've been coding since high school. I've been making my own games and web apps. I just wanted to find a project. So I thought, let's just learn machine learning. I was inspired by AlphaGo, how it defeat Lisa Dahl. I'm like, dang, this is so cool. I've always wanted to build something like that.
Are you a Go player?
No, I'm a chess player. I've actually played competitive chess during high school. But anything around board games, I love. And then, it was during COVID when BTS also blew up a lot as well. So K-pop, AI, these were the trending topics. And then I built a prototype where it's a basic machine learning script where you upload a video of a dancer and you upload yourself dancing the same dance. It will then compare how similar you guys dance and produce screenshots of where you're out of sync. And I posted on YouTube as a vlog. People liked it. And then I applied it to professional dancers, K-pop, and I started ranking K-pop groups. And it went viral across Asia, South Korea, Japan, China went crazy over these videos. For the next 2 years, I created video series based on that. And then along the way, I was trying to refine the program and eventually learn how to build mobile apps. And so this whole AI dance program is now in an app that people can try out. And then, along the way, you pick up new skills. I've also picked up, when you're deep in AI, you naturally come across questions around ethics. So I think around that time, self-driving cars were also a big thing. And there was a moral ethical question, which is like the trolley problem. And once you get into AI ethics, that leads into a rabbit hole of AI regulation. Around 2021, the EU AI Act started to become, theorized. And like, I never thought there'll be a such thing called AI law. Like, that sounded so crazy to me, but it's reality, right? And then, that I've been following that interest part.
Let me tell you, we have been discussing this internally quite a bit, because there is one reading of the EU AI Act which would suggest that any AI used by a lawyer could be an issue, because if it's the way the EU AI Act puts it is if it's something that would influence a judge, right? So depending on how aggressive you want to be with what it is that influences a judge, I mean, you could theoretically say that drafting a contract at some point is meant to influence a judge if that contract then becomes the subject of a dispute. I mean, you could take a very wide reading of that, but even more, I work. They've been public about it, so I don't mind like talking about it. We work with the American Arbitration Association that has built the first AI arbitrator for a very limited set of use cases. Right now, documents only real estate construction or construction disputes, right? So, they're very, very specific segment of cases, but the EU AI Act has a lot to say about AI in the context of a judicial decision or even a decision in dispute resolution. It is for sure taken more seriously. There's more anxiety around it. There's more governance and disclosures, required around doing it. But it's very real. This is not something we're talking about in kind of an abstract anymore. This is actually in the market, not from some, rogue startup, but from the biggest name in dispute resolution. So, I mean, these things are at the EU AI Act is certainly coming up. So, and of course, people care about it, more today. So you've obviously experienced both the impacts of AI and online content. One of the questions I struggle with, because I'm investing a lot these days in podcasts and in media. My business is really a consulting business, but I started out as a content creator. I was originally writing columns on Above the Law about legal tech in 2015. Before, it was really early then. But I worked at ESPN Radio back in the day. I have the skill and know-how to build a media company right now. And in the one sense, it does feel to me okay, this is also along with my thesis of AI that enables more human experiences. Building an online following, building a media company feels like the right play. And then I sort of take a step back and I kind of go, okay, but if I'm looking around corners here, right? Am I building right now for 2021, or am I building for 2030? And there's some part of me that wonders, will media, will the entire influencer community, are we going to be the beneficiaries of? Are we going to be the targets of disruption by AI? And I have to admit, I have a little I continue doing it, but I've got a little bit of analysis paralysis. I'd like to develop better conviction. Help me peek around corners for a minute and tell me how you're thinking about this. And I want to ask Jamie to do the same, because I feel part of the advantage of being early to AI, like you guys talked about, is also being better able to see around corners.
Yeah, Jamie and I talk about this a lot. We're also in the content space. I actually realized that I've been watching Jamie's fitness videos for a long time, but I didn't realize it was him. I'm oh wow, so that was a big revelation. But I think in short, I have a particular philosophy for this question, which is the 3 C's theory, which stands for code, content, and community. So content, so what you just said just above, that falls to the content side of things. But to really make that real is you have to supplement it with code, which represents the tech, and also community, which represents the ecosystem. And I feel if people keep talking about the one-man business and the one-man startup in the future, I think fundamentally, these are the core ingredients for that. And you don't have to turn into a business. It could also be a personal branding thing. The really successful ones have those 3 C's. And I feel like these 3 C's become the new definition of capital. I think traditionally capital has always been about you have the money. But I feel like in this day and age where things are getting more democratized, more accessible, money is not the only barrier anymore. And that, there are other ways to achieve capital, and it's through those 3 C's.
Maybe the 4th C is compute.
Yeah, well, I put that into code. Yeah, you can have as many C's as you want. Yeah.
I think, compute, code is a artifact of compute in these days. To Ray's point, I think Ray and I really bonded over our shared history of being a content creator. Quite 8 to 9 years ago, I think. I have been writing music blogs. I wrote music blogs on Facebook, and as a decent following. I stopped, and 3 years later, I created a YouTube channel just to show calisthenics content and my fitness journey. That got almost 2 million views.
That's amazing.
Quite a lot back in the days.
So in other words, you're not like, this is not like new for you. In other words, like I saw like, you hit on LinkedIn, and there was like a part of me that was like, I wonder what this experience has been like for him, like being famous, because like it kind of just seems like a kind of brainiac lawyer. But no, you guys have like both like been through this before. This makes so much sense to me. Of course, this is not your first time.
I mean, that was unintentional. I did not try to, I did not post those content with the view that I want to become an influencer. I was just trying to share knowledge. But then, which was the same goal back then when I started the Calisthenics channel, because I wanted to give back to the community, because I've brought so much, these kind of fitness video, transformation video, and thought I should do the same. But I actually read Ray's article on, there's no benefits if the vibe coding lawyers just start posting their content on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden it becomes like a rat race. And that really struck me one night, because I found myself trying to think of another app to build, and I was running out of ideas. So
yeah, gosh, that feels like the story that like Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David tell about like getting the renewal of the season of Seinfeld, and it was like I think 22 episodes, and Larry David says that he like went home, got in his bed, and just began crying profusely, because the idea of like, how am I possibly going to create 22 more episodes? Like creating 4 was impossible. Creating 13, I have no idea how we did it. Like I can't do this. And there is like, some, I think there's anxiety. I feel that daily, because, one of the things that we're doing is, as a company, Killer Whale Strategies, is providing like the right, intel and information to our clients so that they can make, the right decisions. So luckily, like AI news moves really fast, but it's not just the news. It's like, coming up with like, here's what the strategy should be. And like having to constantly come up with new things, I think is an anxiety-ridden process. But I also do think that ultimately it is what we're headed towards in a world of AI, where you don't necessarily get to rest on your laurels for as long as you thought. So we might see, software companies shipping updates daily, even hourly. We might, see, content creators having to come up with new ideas more regularly, because it's just easier to do. And so the threshold, I think this is some of what people are like nervous about. What do you, when you think, like, obviously everyone should learn AI, that's easy enough, but what do you guys, and I'll start with Ray and then go to Jamie, what should people be learning right now? And is there a version of, because I've been trying to teach myself a lot of like the theoreticals behind code. So having ChatGPT like work with me on like my understanding of algorithms and a lot of the math involved, thinking through like general concepts. But what would you recommend to lawyers to begin learning right now that, hey, listen, you should learn this because it's either very valuable, or you should learn this because you thought that in order to learn this would take you 4 years. Actually, today it could take you 3 months. Like, what would you suggest, and how people go about that?
Yeah, so my thinking is that learning theory in this day and age, it's like memorizing a dictionary, right? You can learn all the words, but if you don't apply them, there's no point, right? I feel like application is the most important thing. And I think the good thing about lawyers is that lawyers are sort of trained to learn anything on the spot. It can be a topic completely unfamiliar to them, but if they have to learn it, they will learn it, right? I feel like that's the mindset and training that lawyers receive is really optimized for just absorption of knowledge and that cognition.
By the way, this was the greatest argument for lawyers using AI initially, not to draft your documents, but like, hey, anytime you have to learn something new, this is your tutor.
That's right. Exactly. And I feel like my one advice is that, think about one thing that's really annoying in your work, like just one pain point that is annoying enough to really make you angry, but it's also not annoying enough that other vendors have approached it because it's not scalable, not commercial. That's the sweet spot, man. Like those really personal, custom problems that you really dread, and it makes your job boring. Focus on that, right? And no one understands the problem better than you. And if you know the dynamics of the problem, the inputs and outputs that are needed, you'll naturally be able to research. And like lawyers are the ultimate researchers, right? They know how to research. And so just research, test things out, talk to people, and naturally you solve it. And I think a lot of the legal quants basically started like that. Like just do it. I think it's all about execution, to be honest. If that's really key in this day and age, execution, just an iteration and execution. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've heard this is action leads to information.
That's right.
Ray, you stole all my points. But I really want to double down on execution piece. The reason for that is for the legal quants that I've met for the past 2 months, all of them have extremely high agency. By agency, I mean being able to take an idea and execute on it, and then until the thing is perfect or near perfect. And I think a lot of people like to talk about AI, but not many people want to actually do things with it. And I think for a lawyer, to get into this, you kind of need to have that kind of motivation and the kind of grit to tolerate the bugginess of whatever AI tool that they are using. And the reason for that is it's almost like driving a dangerous car again, using that same analogy. You could hit the pedal too hard and then crash, but then do you want to back up and then try again? Or do you just want to say, call quit? Well, yeah, maybe this is not for me. So I think that kind of high agency quality will be extremely important. And we do see that people that have high agency are usually better in AI. So how to cultivate that agency is I think it's something that, it's not easy to really have an answer for, but yeah.
So in other words, 2026 is not going to be the year of AI agents. 2026 is going to be the year of AI agency.
I like that.
All right. Because I'm one of those people that likes to talk about the AI. But I think this is spot on. I think that agency really is the right word here, because and I think agency needs to triumph over anxiety. And I would tell those who have any anxiety, first of all, follow Jamie and Ray. You guys have a couple of ways that people can follow you. You have a LinkedIn group. You can follow them both on LinkedIn. You can also, how can people stay in touch with like what's going on with Legal Quants right now?
So they can follow we're going to launch our Substack pretty soon. So that's where we will maintain contact. The community right now, it's right now we are invitation only. So we want to have lawyers who basically that we think are like-minded to join us. And but then we'll be we also have a LinkedIn page, which is great.
Man, you guys learned this VIP concept from Harvey. I'll tell you, Jamie, I sent you a note. I tried to connect with you on LinkedIn, and then so I'm used to like, and this just shows how like permissionless this entire new world is. There was a time if I would like connect with a legal tech entrepreneur, I would get an immediate connection because like I have invested in startups, and a lot of times companies are looking or they know that I am connected and can introduce them to this one and that one. I sent it a note to you, like it just like sat there. I would like look at it every day. I'm like pending. I'm like, come on, Jamie, connect with me, please. But I have to tell you. It made me even more interested. I'm like, this guy doesn't even need me. This guy does not at all. So I have to tell you something. Like I think the invitation only concept in developing a core community and being very deliberate with that is super smart. I obviously encourage people to stay in touch with you, but then I wanted to come back to this agency and anxiety point and end on this note. Jeff Bezos has a thing about anxiety that I love. He says he used to suffer from terrible anxiety until he realized and reframed that anxiety was a little alarm that his body was sending him to let him know that there's something that he's supposed to be doing that he hasn't started doing yet. And he said, the minute I started, the anxiety would go away. And he said, now I don't look at anxiety as something bad. I just understand, oh, there's something I need to do. What is it, the thing I need to do? Oh, that's what I need to do. Boom, done. Anxiety gone. And I think that for folks who are feeling anxious, what the surveys tend to show over and over again is that the people with the most negative sentiment towards AI are those who have not used it. So if you want to get rid of that anxiety,
do it.
Lean in, just go. I'm not telling you to productionize it for a client yet, but like just kind of like get going and get learning. The sooner you let your brain wrap around this, the better it'll be. Guys, I never go for like an hour and 15 with guests, but I recommend everyone listen to like all parts of this podcast. This is just fabulous. Thanks so much for both of you for joining, and I look forward to following what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much, Zach.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it.